Hello, this is Dr. Schemberger, and in this brief video talk, we're going to talk about writing business-related stories. So behind every number is a story. Remember, we've talked about this when we examine data reporting. The number itself is not really the story. So we don't want to flood our stories, especially with our business news stories, with a bunch of numbers, because that's not what it's about. So what we need to do is when we find numbers, we've got to find the reasons behind those numbers. So if you know of a company, let's say it's a public company that you might be reporting on, and its financial reports are the latest that you have been able to access in the Edgar database, and you notice that the earnings went down in the second quarter compared with the same time period a year ago. Well, why? Was there something that occurred? Could have been the coronavirus, could have been anything that would have contributed to the decline in earnings. That's something that you would need to kind of examine from a business journalism standpoint. So it's up to you to provide that context. We've talked about numerous times the importance of background information and of context, because that's going to really help build and fill the story. In addition, when you're writing business news stories, we want to use simple words. Every news beat has its own jargon, and we've talked about how we want to avoid using that jargon. There might be times when that jargon is necessary, and if so, then you need to explain it. However, in business news stories, the jargon happens to sometimes desensitize the information. For instance, reduction in force. That's just another way of saying that a company is getting ready to lay off people, let people go, fire people, furlough people. So we need to use words that our news audience is going to understand. Remember, you write for a news audience. You don't write for the business people. You don't write for any people in a certain beat. They are our sources. So we've got to make sure that what we write is for our news audience. In addition, we want to use as few numbers as possible because, again, the numbers themselves are not the story. Sometimes, and I've said this before, but many times we have taken our cues from those who cover sports. They don't use as many numbers. They realize that the numbers are not the story. The numbers help them to tell the story. So that's how you have to think about it even when covering business news. You also want to think about the impact that a particular business news story or the development that is occurring, how it's going to have some kind of impact on the readers or your viewers. For instance, if you learn of a local company, whether it's private or public, and how it's going to add some new jobs to a plant or to its operations, well, how many more jobs? And what does that contribute to the local economy? Sometimes they're able to put a dollar amount on that. Those are questions for you to ask and to really get to the heart of that particular development. Think about, really, the bottom line in all of this is think about what you would want to know if you were an employee or a news consumer. This is the news you can use approach in business journalism. So whenever we know of something that is happening in our local economy, what is that going to mean for our news audience? What would they want to know about this? Is it a new product? Is it a loss of jobs? Is it additional jobs? Is it the relocation of a business, a new business coming in? What are those questions? And it's up to you to find out really what is that kind of information that your news audience is going to want to need to have so that way they can use it. So business news is really important. Always think about how, again, everything is connected to business. There's a dollar sign attached to everything from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. So everything you do throughout your daily routines has some kind of business connection, believe it or not. And that concludes this talk about how we write business news stories. And thank you for your attention.